the Second Punic War, Rome came out on top while Carthage suffered defeat. After a tough battle, the Roman Republic managed to overpower its main commercial and military rival in the Western Mediterranean, taking over its resource-rich lands. It seemed like Rome no longer had to worry about the Carthaginians, with the terrifying days when Hannibal was at Rome's doorstep, now just a memory. This was mostly true. Rome was busy with wars of conquest in Greece and Asia. After its defeat, Carthage had shrunk significantly and stuck to its peace treaty with Rome. The Carthaginians paid tribute to the Romans, gave up their army and navy, and focused only on trade, not war. This setup was acceptable to almost everyone. The Numidian king Massinissa, naturally inclined to war and a key ally and friend of the Romans in Africa, would sometimes harass Carthage, encroaching on its land. According to the peace treaty, the Carthaginians weren't allowed to respond to his attacks without Roman approval, so every time Numidian aggression happened, they sent out envoys to Rome, asking for help to sort things out. The Romans were hesitant and inconsistent in their response to the situation. Sometimes they sent delegations to Africa to settle disputes. One such mission in 153 BC included Senator Marcus Porcius Cato. Having fought in the Second Punic War, he vividly remembered the events from 50 years earlier and the heavy price Rome had paid to defeat Carthage. Seeing a thriving city that had nearly destroyed his homeland not long ago made a deep impression on the senator. Cato became convinced that the Carthaginians were once again a serious threat to Rome and was determined to ensure Carthage's complete destruction at any cost. From then on, he ended each of his Senate speeches with the phrase, "Moreover, I consider that Carthage must be destroyed. Caterem censo Carthaginem esse delendem." Cato, a skilled speaker, gradually saw his views on the Carthaginian threat gain support among the Romans. The change in mood in Rome soon reached Massinissa. As dissatisfaction with Carthage grew in Rome, the Numidian king became more daring in his actions. His raids angered the Carthaginians so much that they turned against all Numidian supporters in Carthage and expelled them from the city, a move that once seemed unthinkable. And with the champions from this game, Carthage would have had a much better chance against Rome. But unlike Carthage, you don't have to wait for the Senate's permission to build your army. And by the way, stick around till the end and you'll learn how to get some free stuff for this game via the link in my description. The game is Raid Shadow Legends, the sponsor of this video, and it has an event called Web of Corruption, which you can claim the new legendary champion Vallaryn the Equalizer for free by logging in for 7 days during the Vallaryn Chase. It runs from July 2nd to August 18th, but make sure you start by July 31st. Vallaryn is a must-have legendary champion since he has powerful AoE attacks, ignores defense, and applies debuffs to enemies. There's also a limited time event dungeon where you can fight Rhea the Mourned to earn pinpoint gear and other cool rewards. One thing I like about Raid is just how much there is to do. You're collecting champions, experimenting with different team compositions, and figuring out which abilities work together best. Since I cover military history, I enjoy games where assembling the right force actually matters, instead of just mashing buttons, and Raid Shadow Legends is such a game. Ready to build your own formidable army? Then no need to wait. Download the game through the link in the description or QR code and start with 3 free legendary and 1 free epic champion. You'll instantly get Karato Foxhunter, then Raid is going to give you a choice between 6 legendary champions, but you could redeem only 1, so choose wisely. Personally, I'd recommend Wrath for Grand Oak Padraig because he's an excellent support, but you could choose whichever one fits your playstyle. And of course, log in for 7 days to get legendary Vallaryn the Equalizer for free. Once you reach level 15, you'll also receive the epic champion Alure. That's an incredible head start, and using my link or QR code helps a lot to support my channel. And with that, back to Carthage. When Massinissa invaded Carthaginian territory again, a large army was put together to fight back. The Carthaginians broke the peace treaty by not asking Rome for permission to go to war with Numidia. However, this short conflict ended with Carthage's defeat. At first, Massinissa's experienced troops defeated the quickly assembled Punic militia led by Hasdrubal. Then, after a long siege of the camp, the Numidians managed to completely destroy the Carthaginian army. Out of 58,000 soldiers, only a few hundred survived. After Carthage's devastating defeat, Rome jumped at the chance to use the situation as an excuse to start a new war. preparations for the campaign began in the city. Worried about the threat of facing both the Numidians and the Romans, the Carthaginians tried to find a peaceful solution. They sent several delegations to Rome, but the Senate was deceitful. The Carthaginian envoys were given vague assurances, while war preparations and mobilization continued quietly. Meanwhile, Utica, the second largest city in the Carthaginian state, switched sides and joined the Romans. Following this, the Roman Senate quickly decided to go to war. In 149 BC, an invasion army was gathering in Sicily, with over 80,000 soldiers, more than twice the size of the force led by Publius Scipio 50 years earlier, when he defeated Hannibal himself. The campaign promised plenty of spoils and glory, drawing in eager volunteers to sign up. The consuls Manius Manilius and Lucius Marcius Censorinus were chosen to lead the army. Under their command, Scipio Aemilianus, the grandson of the famous Scipio Africanus, served as a military tribune. The Senate secretly instructed the consuls to wage war until Carthage was completely destroyed. The Carthaginians were in despair. In a desperate move, they executed all those who had started the war with Numidia, though the commander Hasdrubal managed to escape execution and began rallying troops under his banner once again. After many pleas from the Carthaginians for a peaceful solution, the Roman Senate reluctantly offered a temporary fix. The Carthaginians had to hand over 300 of their noblest youths to the Roman consuls as hostages. The Carthaginian Senate agreed to this demand, taking their own children away from their families, yet even this sacrifice was in vain. The Romans then sailed from Sicily and landed in Utica. That same day, Carthage received the devastating news of a declaration of war and the start of hostilities. The city was thrown into panic and despair, as Carthage was completely unprepared for conflict. It didn't have a naval fleet, a standing army, or even mercenaries. There were no allies or reserves to count on if a siege occurred. In the recent war with Massinissa, the Carthaginians had lost over 50,000 young men, and the Romans had made no clear demands. Once again, a delegation went to the Roman camp. Consul Lucius Marcius Censorinus demanded that the Carthaginians hand over all of their weapons and release all prisoners. He promised to reveal the next set of demands only after these conditions were met. Desperate to avoid war at any cost, the Carthaginians agreed to these terms. However, when their envoys returned to the Roman camp, the consul revealed the final condition. To end the war, the people must leave Carthage and relocate anywhere in the country, but no closer than 80 stadia from the coast. The city of Carthage itself was to be destroyed. This harsh demand was completely unacceptable to the Carthaginians. They had lived by the sea and prospered because of it throughout their history. For a seafaring people, giving up the sea was like giving up life itself. And as a result, the Carthaginians decided to fight to the very end. The Carthaginians asked for a month to meet the Romans' demands, and the Romans agreed, believing that the unarmed Carthaginians were not a threat. During this time, the people of the city did everything they could to prepare defenseless Carthage for defense. First, they made sure no information got out by ruthlessly getting rid of all Italians, Romans, and their supporters in the city. After that, they began frantic preparations for the upcoming siege. All slaves were freed. Day and night, forges and workshops worked tirelessly to produce darts, shields, and swords. Catapults and warships were built non-stop, using materials from dismantled buildings. Bronze statues of gods were melted down to make weapons. Women donated their hair to make ropes. The city received food supplies by sea, which were essential for feeding the more than 700,000 residents of the capital and its surrounding areas. A new army was being put together, and Hasdrubal, the same commander who had led the Carthaginian forces in the failed campaign against Massinissa, was appointed as the commander-in-chief. When the Roman army approached the city a month later, they didn't find open gates and residents coming out to meet their demands. Instead, they encountered a city fully prepared for a siege. Carthage at this point was a formidable fortress, located on a large peninsula connected to the mainland by a narrow isthmus, It was surrounded by city walls on all sides. The part of the city facing the sea was protected by a single defensive wall built on impregnable cliffs, while the section facing the isthmus and the mainland was safeguarded by a triple row of walls. The walls towered impressively, reaching about 15 meters high and up to 9 meters thick. The city also had 2 connected harbors, one for trade and the other for military use, both protected by chains across their entrances. In the northern part of the city, known as the lower city, were the suburbs, also surrounded by walls. The southern part was called the high city, and above it, on a high hill, stood the citadel of Byrsa. The Romans, with their powerful army, were confident that their seemingly unarmed opponents wouldn't be able to put up much of a fight. However, the Carthaginians managed to fend off the initial attacks on the city walls, causing significant losses for the Romans. The consuls began a careful siege of the city by both land and sea, building embankments and constructing siege engines and towers. Censorinus led the land forces, while Manilius was in charge of the fleet. A sense of rivalry even developed between the consuls over whose soldiers would be the first to break into the city. Initially, luck was on the Roman side. They managed to destroy a section of the outer wall in the southern part of the city. However, the Carthaginians not only drove back the Romans trying to get through the gap, but also completely repaired the damaged wall section overnight. After repelling the attack, the Carthaginians turned their attention to the Roman fleet. They made fire ships from small vessels and sailing boats, and waiting for a favorable wind towards the Roman ships, the Carthaginians set these vessels on fire and let them drift. As a result, the fire ships almost destroyed the entire Roman fleet. After this, maintaining a blockade of Carthage from the sea became much more difficult, as merchants delivering supplies to the besieged city on fast ships began to break through more and more often. The Roman army turned its attention to besieging the capital and taking control of the Carthaginian cities in the area. Hasdrubal's field army actively hindered the Romans, frequently ambushing them with surprise attacks. The Romans sought help from the Numidians, but Massinissa was hesitant to support his allies. The Roman invasion interfered with his own plans for a full takeover of Carthage. Moreover, he worried that a Roman victory might become a future threat to his kingdom. The siege of Carthage and the resulting standoff dragged on for 2 years. The army fell into inactivity, and the military camp increasingly took on a carnival-like atmosphere. Under Hasdrubal's leadership, the Carthaginians took advantage of the Numidians' inaction and the Romans' apparent weakness, reclaiming nearly all the mainland cities the Romans had initially seized. They even managed to set up a camp near Carthage's walls and organize the supply of provisions to the capital by land. The naval blockade was ineffective, failing to stop traders who managed to break through and deliver supplies to the city. The Roman Senate and the entire Republic were growing increasingly frustrated with the inaction of their massive army. In 147 BC, Scipio Aemilianus was elected as consul and put in charge of the expeditionary forces in Africa. He was seen as the only military leader capable of effectively challenging the Carthaginians and had the full confidence of the army. When he arrived in Carthage with reinforcements, Scipio Aemilianus quickly reorganized the army and restored order. He started by removing all non-essential personnel from the camp, including sutlers, traders, and prostitutes. He then took decisive action to eliminate indiscipline and debauchery among the legionaries, revitalizing their fighting spirit through rigorous work and training. After achieving his goal, he launched a strong siege on Carthage. The Carthaginian camp near the city walls was surrounded and set on fire. The legionaries built huge fortifications across the isthmus, connecting the mainland to Carthage, cutting the city off from all land-based supplies. During a nighttime attack on the suburbs, the Roman forces managed to climb the city walls. They did this by using the tower of a wealthy local resident next to the outer wall. From there, they extended bridges onto the wall and broke into the defensive perimeter. A diversionary unit captured the gates, allowing the Roman troops to enter the suburb. Panic broke out in the lower city. Residents fled in large numbers to the upper city, where a severe food shortage soon developed. With the blockade tightened, only a few merchant ships managed to get into the harbor, providing limited food supplies, and as a result, famine took hold in Carthage. To worsen the situation for the townspeople and force Carthage to surrender, Scipio came up with a plan to block the city's last remaining access point, the sea route, through the commercial harbor. He decided to build a dam that would cut off the harbor from the sea. This was a huge challenge. At first, the town people watched the Romans' efforts and just laughed, mocking the Roman soldiers working on the construction. But as the dam grew wider and longer, their laughter turned into cries of despair. The Carthaginians realized that once the dam was finished and the harbor entrance was blocked, the city would face starvation. Inside Carthage, frantic efforts began as well. The residents started digging a new channel for their ships, and to do this, they took down one of their outer harbor walls. They worked so secretly that when they finally broke through to the open sea and launched their fleet, it caught the Romans completely off guard. The new entrance to the Carthaginian harbor was in a spot that was very hard to block with a dam. Plus, this entrance was next to an embankment where the Carthaginians had built strong fortifications. 3 days after these events, the Carthaginians decided to take on the Romans in a naval battle. They sent out their entire fleet, lining it up for battle. Made from leftover materials and scrap construction beams, this fleet mostly consisted of small ships and didn't really impress the Romans. As a result, the Romans were quick to accept the challenge. The Carthaginians fought bravely. Their small, fast ships were almost too quick for the larger Roman quinquiremes. The battle went on all day, but neither side could claim victory. As the sun began to set, the Carthaginians decided to head back to the harbor, not because they were defeated, but to rest and continue the fight the next day. They moved towards the new harbor entrance quickly, but without panic. However, the passage was very narrow and the Carthaginians had a lot of ships. The first ships to arrive quickly blocked the entrance, and the larger ships, unable to get through, had to run aground on the embankment with fortifications, where they were captured by Roman ships. The Romans seized the opportunity to attack the enemy's stationary ships, sparking a battle that raged with renewed intensity until nightfall. During this time, the Carthaginians suffered significant losses to their fleet. The next day, Scipio launched an assault on the Carthaginian fortifications, aiming to capture them and use them as a launching point for an attack on the harbor itself. This fierce battle stretched over several days. The Romans used battering machines and rams to assault and partially demolish the fortifications. In response, the Carthaginians conducted night raids against the Roman siege engines, successfully destroying some of the machines and repairing the damaged fortifications themselves. Scipio then ordered the construction of a wall opposite the Carthaginian defenses, which soon matched the height of the city's walls. Throughout the summer, daily military clashes continued in this region. Eventually, the Romans' relentless efforts paid off. They managed to completely block the harbor's entrances and exits, effectively surrounding Carthage. This led to a devastating famine in the city, causing a rapid decline in the population and leaving the garrison weakened by malnutrition and disease. With the capital fully blockaded, Scipio turned his attention to the mainland cities of Carthage, which were still unconquered and supplying Hasdrubal's army with food and troops. It was winter, and the Carthaginian forces were camped near the fortress of Nephrys, not expecting an attack due to the usual winter lull in military activity. However, Scipio launched an assault. Together with the allied Numidian army, he defeated the Carthaginians and, after a tough but brief siege, captured the fortress. The fall of Nephrys had such a significant impact on the other Libyan cities that they all surrendered to the Roman forces. Carthage lost its last outside support. Inside the city, hunger was everywhere. Thousands died, but surrender was not an option. As spring began, Scipio launched a bold attack on the upper city. In a quick move, Roman forces took over the southern walls of Carthage, which were barely defended by a garrison weakened by starvation. The Romans pushed into the harbors and the surrounding squares and markets. It seemed the outcome was decided and the city had fallen. However, the townspeople, weakened by hunger and disease, fought back with desperate courage. Fierce battles broke out on every street, in every house, and in every room. Relentless, day and night. Scipio kept rotating his assault units to keep up the pressure. Gradually, the townspeople fell back to the Bursa citadel. The area was crowded with multi-story buildings, each turned by the Carthaginians into a layered fortress. The Romans now faced the tough job of taking not just the buildings, but each floor within them. Battles raged not only in the streets, but also across rooftops. After capturing a building, the legionaries would lay beams and planks to bridge to the next, engaging once more with the defenders. Blood flowed like rivers through the streets, and the roadside ditches and trenches filled quickly with the bodies of dead and wounded Carthaginians. The massacre continued relentlessly, day and night. Initially, the Romans were hesitant to set fire to the houses, worried that the flames might pose a risk to their own soldiers. However, as the resistance proved both prolonged and fierce, Scipio ordered the streets where the defense was strongest to be set ablaze, and the burned houses to be demolished to help them advance. The soldiers, without wasting time dismantling the large 6-story buildings, simply brought them crashing to the ground. Along with the half-burned beams, people who had tried to hide in the hidden corners of the houses fell onto the pavement. Still alive, they were thrown into the ditches along with the debris. The battle's intensity reached its peak. The street fighting continued for 6 days and 6 nights. Eventually, all of Carthage was captured except for the citadel of Bursa, where all who were alive sought refuge. Realizing the hopelessness of their situation, the townspeople pleaded for mercy. Scipio himself, exhausted both morally and physically, agreed to concessions. He decided to spare the lives of all except the Roman deserters. From the fortress, between 50 to 55,000 survivors emerged, all of whom were enslaved. The roughly 900 defectors realized there was no hope of salvation. They gathered in the temple of Asclepius, located at the highest point of the citadel. The Romans planned to starve them out, but unwilling to surrender, they set the temple on fire and perished in the flames. So fell Carthage. Rome celebrated its victory. The hated city was ordered to be burned after being looted, with all its buildings and walls destroyed, and the site itself cursed. Carthage burned for 17 days. It was then leveled. A furrow plowed through its remains, and a curse was placed on it. Centuries later, the Romans rebuilt Carthage, but it was a completely different city. Of the ancient city, founded by the Phoenicians and enduring for many centuries, not a trace remained. If you made it to the end of this video, we really appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. Follow along on our journey through ancient civilizations and history. If you'd like to support the channel, join our Patreon or become a YouTube channel member. You get early access to new episodes, behind-the-scenes looks, and more. You can also leave a super thanks below to give us a little extra boost. If you want to listen to history on the go, check out our all-new podcast, Parabellum History. You can find it on all major podcast platforms. Thanks again for tuning in, and we hope to see you next time. And don't forget to download Raid Shadow Legends using the link in the description or scanning the QR code on the screen. Signing up through my link will give you 3 legendary champions, 1 epic champion, and additional bonuses to help you get started.